Good morning.
Chad, I would like very much to be a part of these meetings, the ones that are like the one I saw you at on the left.
Oh, yeah.
I've found it quite fascinating.
Good. Yeah, I will mention them in our announcements if you want to add a little bit about it. It'd be nice to have more committee members attending that.
I would like it very much.
Okay, great.
I'm walking around talking about Green Lake all the time.
All right. Perfect. Well, I'll keep you in the loop on when the meetings are.
Thank you.
Welcome to that.
So I'll call the meeting to order. I believe we have a quorum. 4 members. Okay. And Julie is on Zoom. We have 5. Just so we have- Call the meeting to order, as I said. I need confirmation we are properly posted under chapter 19.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from May 5th.
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion, changes? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposition, the motion to approve minutes is approved. Public comment on agenda items. Everything? Now we'll move on to announcements. Chad?
Okay, several announcements for today. The first one, we have our annual association dues that they won't be due until 23. They are going up $50 for our organization, so it'll be $2,074 for our dues for annually for our organization, which again includes staff members and committee members. So you're all part of that organization. So the more you can partake in those events that they have, the better. Good job. Staffing. That increases staff. So it's $50 per account. The appointments, the citizen appointments, Bruce and Dan Stokes were appointed at the last county board meeting, so that'll be 2 years. They'll be on our committee again. So looking forward to it. So we have a full committee. Dan was sick today, so he wasn't able to attend. So he'll hopefully get the next year in July. Our opening for our conservation technician, we made an offer to somebody, so it looks like we will have that position filled. She'll be starting on June 20th. She comes from a background, a degree in biology from UWGB with a master's in environmental science. And she's been working the last 4 years for Lumberjack RC&D with an invasive partnership there. So I think she'll be a good addition for the department. She seems like she'll be a go-getter, and I'm looking forward to be fully staffed again. So we are very, very busy. So it's going to be welcome to get somebody on board and get them trained on all the great things we do. Budget. I am currently working on our budget. I don't have my levy target yet for the department, but I'm starting to work on the numbers. So I'm anticipating I'll have a draft budget hopefully for July meeting to bring to committee. I am going to include a truck in there. We have a truck that's going on 20 years old, so I'm looking to get that truck replaced. The executive is supportive of that.
Do we have it on last year?
Yes, yes, it was on last year. We pulled it, so I'm looking to get that approved this year, but I'll have the details after July meeting. Climate smart proposals. Those are the 2 proposals I talked about at the last meeting. That's with the USDA for the climate smart initiatives. So we had one proposal with Foxhole and Edge Dairy Cooperative, and then with DNR. So I just wanted to let the committee know that they received 450 proposals in the United States. So it's going to be highly competitive. There's $1 billion in a pot of money there. So we should know by the end of summer if any of those were awarded. So I'll keep you all posted on that. If those were. What else do we have here? Okay, so our ordinance, every so often we like to send letters out to the towns to remind them that we have our livestock waste ordinance. So the reason we send these out to the towns is to remind them if somebody comes in for a building permit, or if anybody mentions livestock at all, they need to contact our department, because we have the ordinance in place where there's permits needed if you're going to house livestock or do any type of newer storage, newer storage abandonment. Some of these slip through the cracks with the towns that will issue the building permit for livestock, and they're not sending them to us first. So it could cause problems if the building, for example, gets put up and we don't look at it and it's too close to surface water. We could potentially have to remove the building, and we don't want that to happen. So we're trying to get ahead of the game to make sure that the setbacks are being met. I think the town's aware of that. And we will also send it out to our planning and zoning department as well, just to remind them. So just an awareness with the towns to keep us on the radar for those types of things. And that is all I have for announcements.
Thank you. To the director. We'll move on to sheriff's report. I don't really have anything additional. To answer questions if somebody has one myself. Hearing none, then we'll move on to the business items. Sure.
We get to that. I just want to mention we had our area association meeting in Fond du Lac. I thought it was very informational. Kay was there. She wants to add anything, but lots of good information on soil health, the Green Lake Association. And again, if any committee members want to attend future ones, you're more than welcome to. The next one will be in October in Outagamie County. There'll be a tour for that. So I don't give anything else.
Yeah, of course I do. Green Lake was really interesting. Apparently there are people who decide that they want to purchase the property around the lake. And what they do is, and I don't know that they do this, but I suspect that they have VRBOs there and they want their yards to look wonderful. And so what they do is they put fertilizer, they put weed killer onto their yards. It turns out that 60% of the phosphorus that goes into the lake comes from those homes. 40% and everything around is agricultural, not on the lake, but around behind all of those homes. They produce about 40% of the runoff that goes into the lake. What I found totally fascinating was that lake is dead under 30 feet. Now we're talking about the deepest lake in Wisconsin, aren't we? 600 feet?
I think it's 250, 70, the depth, if I recall, for Green Lake.
Yeah, and I sit there and I think about areas that I know that have life below 30 feet. And Green Lake is dead. Just interesting facts. It appears that the education for the agricultural areas is starting to take hold. But for those of us who have yards and want it to be green, we still need education.
Thank you. Anything else, Dan?
That would be it.
Okay, we'll move to business item A, update report on the Great Lakes Sediment Reduction Nutrient Program.
Stand just makes it easier for me. We're going to start with a soil health challenge. So first off, my name is Sheila Smith and I'm the agronomist. I've been with Winnebago County. This is my 10th year. Before that, I was a private crop consultant for 22 years. So our soil health challenge, what it is, so it started with soil health being a buzzword. And we wanted to be part of explaining and sharing what soil health is with the community. So we started our soil health challenge in 2018. And it's a 6-year program with a farmer, and what it entails is that they commit to 6 years of no-till and cover crops, and also to share their knowledge that they have learned and share their difficulties. We learn from each other that way, and the main concept is to have farmers teaching farmers. I can talk all I want, but they're going to learn more from another farmer than they are from someone that's in an office. So we've been working on that so far. We have 3 different people. We had one start in 2018. His name is Shane. Little squirrel. Anyway, we're locating them right now. We're picking them right now by location. We're trying to start with some of the more visible places. So Shane is on Highway F, and then we signed 2 last year because we did not sign any in 2020 or 2019. And Todd Messerschmidt is one of the new ones, and he lives on Highway 44. And then Dave Zwicky is a new one, and he will start this fall also, and he's on Highway I. If someone is interested and they don't live on a highway, we are still more than willing to work with them and have them join. And we just, since we're just starting, we're trying to get a little more visuals. So that's why we've been pushing towards being on a highway. So in this 6-year program, they're basically committing to minimizing their disturbance of the soil, maximizing their soil coverage by cover crops, maximizing living roots. So what we're trying is for, say, a winter rye that would have roots in the ground and growing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we want as much plant activity in the soil. And then the last part would be to maximize the diversity of the crops or cover crops. So we're trying to get them not to just do corn, soybeans, and rye. After soybeans, or if they do wheat, we're trying to get them to add several different cover crops, what we would call a multi or a blend of cover crops. That way you're getting a different diversity of crops that are out there instead of just the corn and soybeans. Each year that they accomplish these goals, then their incentive payment would increase every year. So the first year, which we call our site prep, it's $60, and then year 2, it's also $60 because it's just moving into the season of doing this. Third year is $80, year 4 is $100, year 5 is $120, and year 6 is $150. They are required to have a field day at least once during this time period and share their results. I think it's been so far really good. I'm really looking forward to working with the 2 new people that we've acquired. And are there any questions?
Yeah. The cover crops, you say that it's right. I watched Yellowstone and they were talking about the crop coverage killing. Boy, I'm on to killing today, aren't I?
That's all right.
Killing the soil. Can you explain what these cover crops do to not kill the soil?
It keeps,
Not kill the soil.
so basically what you're doing is you're just adding more and more organic matter. Do you ever remember we used to talk about green manure?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what cover crops are. And instead of calling it green manure, we now call it cover crops no-till soil. So it's very similar, basic concept, except now we added no-till, so we don't have as much destruction. So we're keeping the little guys and the biology in the soil growing and keeping it active.
And those fields, then, do you have to have a, you always heard every 5 years or 7 years, you don't do anything with that? You
That-
just let it be fallow? Does this take the place of that?
So we don't do the fallow system around here. That's generally out south or out west. And a lot of that concept is to, in that year when they're not cropping it, is they get a lot of weeds, et cetera, and other growth. So that in a sense is a different form of cover crops. So but they're not harvesting that. And also what they use the fallow year for is to accumulate moisture. So with cover crops, you are accumulating more moisture in the soil, but then in the spring, it actually helps dry the soil out better because it's using evaporation, transpiration from the plant to kind of dry out the soil. So actually, generally speaking, once it's been in no-till and cover crop for 5 to 6 years, those fields actually, you can get on those fields earlier than a field that's been worked.
Now, why do we not want to till? That was one of the things I learned down at that meeting.
Why do you not want to till? We have a slope, and then we till it in the fall, and there's nothing there to hold all that soil. And then we get a really good rain in the fall or the early spring. Where's all the soil going to go? It's going to go immediately down the hill. Yeah. So if we have plants there, those roots are going to hopefully, and they do, catch the soil and hold it in place. So then you're not having as much erosion, and you don't have as much runoff.
Well, and what they said at the event down in Fond du Lac was that the soil retains the moisture more when it's not tilled. If you turn it over, then everything dries out that much
And
more
you're
rapidly.
also, with all the, like worms are a very good example, but there's all sorts of viruses and bacteria and fungi in the soil. But worms are a real good example because they make holes all the way down into, who knows how far they go down. Some of them can go down pretty far. And all those areas let in more moisture, and then the soil even further down will hold on to that water. Whereas a lot of times on a plowed field, you have a dead pan where this is as far as you plow, and nothing gets below it. And a lot of times, if it's really bad, you can even see that the crop roots won't even pass that dead pan. So the soil or the cover crops are part of the concept is for them to grow and to help break up that soil, or the hard pan. And then as the insects increase, they would help break up the hard pan also. And then they have more ability to hold water and nutrients and move it around in the soil. So it's.
How long does it take until you have a healthy field?
There is no real answer for that. Everybody has a different concept of what healthy field is for them. A lot of people say that they lose yield with no-till and cover crops. Others say it's the best field I've ever had. So it's no two farms are alike, no two fields are alike. So it also depends on how bad the soil was, originally. I mean, if you've had a lot of manure is a really good example. If you've had a lot of manure going on these fields, you're putting on organic matter every year. So you get to fields that are just corn and soybean. It has changed the soil so much because there is no organic matter going in, and the plants are just taking it out. So then that's a much more tired soil is what I like to call it.
It's okay, get over your deadness.
Yeah,
It's tired.
it's tired.
And one thing that's really nice about how we're structured, and I know she alluded to this with our soil health challenge, is a lot of the programs like through the federal government, they'll pay for 1 year for cover crops and no-till. but it takes time. And what's nice with how we have it structured is the carrots at the end, and the farmer wait for that 5th or 6th year to get the biggest payment to really have it shine for those initiatives. Because
So-
it does take time.
So Chad, at that 6-year point, because again, at Fond du Lac, they were saying their program went for 3 years, and generally speaking, the farmers would revert to their old ways because they weren't getting their subsidies. And by tilling, they get their subsidies. Is the 6-year period, is that proving to be something which is going to have the farmer choose to keep going that way?
We're hoping. If you look at the entire community, since I started 10 years ago, I could drive around in the early spring and absolutely horrified at how much bare earth there was. And you can, the soil that covered the snow in the ditches was just unbelievable. And as the years have progressed and more people have attempted, there's a lot of, I've tried it 1 year and it won't work. No-till and cover crops is not a 1-year program. It really takes time, it takes a commitment, and I'm gonna say it, at least a 5-year commitment to really see a big difference.
Okay.
One of the guys that works for, or is part of the demo farm network, he actually has dropped his yield in several of his fields, knowing that in the future it will increase, and 3 years later it already started. So he was willing to take that chance to mainly because he had water hemp, which is impossible to deal with. And so he actually, I'm gonna hand those around because the picture on front is who I'm talking about. And what he started doing is he plants his rye, and then in the spring, he rolls it and crimps it, and then it proceeds to die, and he plants his soybeans. And he has reduced his water hemp problem significantly.
Now, when you say crimp, is it like crimping my hair?
Yep. It has to be, it can't just be rolled because rolling just kind of flattens it, but the crimping kind of does like a mush on it, so it stops the plant from being able to regrow.
Okay.
So this picture is one of our demo farms, and his name is Rick Pefkey. And if you guys ever get a chance to go to a demo farm network field day, and especially if it's at his place, he's phenomenal. I'm really proud to say he's in our county. So are there any other questions? Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions?
What's done? Well, no, I've got another one.
All right.
What happens with the rye?
The rye, once it's crimped, that kills it. And then it just, so what you see here on the front, so this is
Okay.
when it's being planted, so it's still green. By a couple months from there, it'll all be brown. So it actually creates a mat that keeps the weeds from coming up through it.
Okay. So it just goes back.
Yep, it just rots and goes right back into the soil. It's actually, I never thought it would work, I'll be honest with you. So I'm learning also.
Thank you. Of course, I think of rye and bourbon.
Exactly.
That's why I was wondering if this is used.
We do have rye we grow, so don't worry, we're not gonna short out our bourbon, so can't do that. Now I'm gonna move on to the Great Lakes Sediment and Reduction Program. We call it GLSNR. I love that one. So one thing about government is you can always, I just love the acronyms. So GLSNR is what we call the Great Lakes Sediment Nutrient Reduction Program. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background information, and then I'm going to let Emily talk about this. So we did it back in November 2021. The agreement was signed between Foxwood Watershed Alliance, which is partly Corinne, and Winnebago County for the grant for the Rat River Watershed. Part of that grant was hoping and working on getting a new position that is funded full-time. Not just grant funded, but funded through the county, so it's a full-time position continuously. So I'd like to thank the LCC who are working on that one. They did a wonderful job, and we got Emily from that position. So we're really excited that that went through in November of 2021 also. So our first step, once we got the grant through Foxwood Watershed Alliance, was to determine which farms to approach in the Rat River area. So our parameters started with ease of communication, willingness to try new ideas, willingness to share experiences at a field day, and preferably have liquid manure available. Part of the grant would be to use low disturbance manure injection, which normally when you see a manure injector, it moves the soil out of the way and flips it over. So low disturbance manure would be low disturbance. You have a shank that goes in and it goes underneath the soil and it doesn't flip the soil over. There's all sorts of different ones, and some are more aggressive than others. And I think as we go further down this road in agronomy, we'll see those machines get better too. So anyway, back to this. We decided, which was a good idea, not to require liquid manure availability. And then we had a suggestion of possibly, if we have a farm that is not a dairy without liquid manure, that maybe they would haul some in from a different farm. That part was changed when the price of fertilizer doubled, and then the price of manure, so that no longer could be worked. So anyway, we had 3 dairy farms that we originally approached, and unfortunately, 2 of them didn't want to do it. One due to health, and one due to he had too much of his land already signed up with NRCS for similar projects. After that, so we had to write a farmer champion protocol, which kind of was to tell the farmers what their part is in the grant and what they were required to do. So after we did that, we did initial calls, found out that our first 2 of our first 3 were not available. So then we had to go back to the drawing board and we asked another dairy farmer, and he agreed, but he said, I can't guarantee you any manure because I'm selling the cows. So we have one dairy farmer that sold cow 2 to 3 years ago, and well, he's not a dairy farmer anymore, I guess. And then another dairy farmer that sold the cows less than a month after he signed the contract, knowing that he was selling the cows and that we would not have manure. So we only have 1 with manure. We really wanted to have more with liquid manure, but we're running out of dairy farms in this county. So encourage your dairy farmers to remain dairy farmers. Okay, so one of the things as our county, what we've decided to do is, as we're working in a watershed, if we get a grant for a specific watershed, like the Rat River, to do soil health, and which is again the no-till cover crops, and then the low disturbance manure for liquid manure. And we wanted to take this just a step further, and Emily has done some mapping, looking for any erosion areas that we might be able to approach landowners or farmers and offer them cost sharing to maybe put in a waterway or a buffer or anything of that nature, just to slow down erosion and slow down the phosphorus movement. And then we've also started looking at livestock facilities in the watershed, and we're going to approach some of the ones that may have runoff and try to help those get that fixed so we can stop the runoff from those farms. And then just let all the other livestock owners know about the ordinance. There's a lot of horse people out there with just pastures, and they do not need an animal lot, or they do not need an animal permit if they don't have pens or lots and pastures. Pastures obviously are grass, lots are not. So we want to approach a lot of the horse people and a lot of, this really small guys that only have a couple of cows, and just remind them of what the ordinance says, why it's important, and how it might affect them. So after that, I'm gonna let Emily start, and she's gonna tell you all the exciting things that she's gonna do in her life. Are there any questions before Emily starts?
I have one, this injection process you were talking about.
Mhm.
And what depth are they doing the injection?
Right now, it's variable, and we're finding that 8 feet.
What graph?
8 inches is pretty aggressive, ends up being pretty aggressive. So it's ending up that it's, between 4 and 6 inches right now. Some is a little less. But the concept is we want to get it in the soil so that it's not going to get rained on and run off. But we also don't want to disturb the soil. And I've seen a few hay fields and other cover crops that have been planted, and then they come in with the low disturbance manure. And for the first week, you can see the lines where they injected it, but the soil's not turned over, and then the cover crop just regrows right after it. So then the cover crops are kind of helping to take up those nutrients and hold them in place over winter.
So your focus is the root zone of the
Yes,
crop?
absolutely.
Thank you.
All right,
Quick question.
go ahead.
Herbicide resistant weeds are a problem. What are some of the weeds that are resistant to herbicides? Dandelions?
Well,
Blackgrass.
in the yards, I don't know. In a field, the main one right now is water hemp has moved up into this area, and it is rampant, and it is a beast because it does not have a specific time that it germinates. It germinates all year long. So if you spray it in the spring, you're only going to kill what's there, and if you have a residual, it's only going to hold it for maybe 30 days.
Oh, okay.
So it's still going to keep growing after that, and by the end of the season, you can have a jungle out there with the water hemp. And that was the reason on the front where this gentleman was planting the rye, laying it down and killing it so that it would cover the soil and help where those seedlings couldn't continue because they're not getting light.
So it got switched from conventional tillage, which Bruce, you know what that is. That's the disc in back of a tractor, right? What it is. To strip till or no till. What exactly is strip till?
Strip till would be, and we have a few farmers in the county that do it. You'll find them more near Nebraska. They come in and they till just the area that they're going to plant into.
Okay.
So the row between is not disturbed, but the plant area is.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Alrighty, my name is Emily Pefkey. I am the new watershed specialist here for the county. A little bit about myself. I grew up on a very small dairy farm in Oconto County, in the tiny town or area of Klondike. My dad still farms up there. We have like 60 milking cows right now, and occasionally I go up there on the weekends and still help out. This last May, I graduated from Fox Valley Technical College with my associate's degree as a natural resource technician. I am going to tell you a little bit about the farmers that are part of this Great Lakes Sediment and Nutrient Reduction Program.
So we'll do that before you.
Starting off, we have Dan Riekman. He is a 4th generation farmer. He farms about 1,200 acres. He is one of them that sold his dairy cows. He sold them 2 years ago due to surgery and just the drop in milk prices. He's going to be doing no-till and cover crops on 148 acres of his farm. We have Larry Englewood. He is a 5th generation farmer. Him and his brother have been farming together. And their farm was established in 1856, so it's really neat to see that old of a farm still running. And he's gonna be doing the cover crops and no-till on 33.5 acres of his land. And then we have lastly Lydell Pefkey. He's the owner of Ledge Rock Dairy. Him and his wife established their farm in 1989. However, they had a fire in 1996. So they had to reestablish, and now he farms with his brother. And he has 400 cows, and he has about 1,600 acres of land. He's gonna be doing the no-till cover crops and the low disturbance manure. And he's gonna be doing 89.95 acres of his land. He also already does have some other best management practices on his lands, including waterways and low pressure irrigation. And then with all three of these farmers, we have come to a total of 271 acres that they're going to be implementing these practices on. And recently, me and Sheila went out and we had interviews with all the farmers on the sheet of paper. It just goes through the whole interview. But I'm just gonna tell you about what their expectations really are for what's gonna happen over the next 3 years of this project. So Dan is hoping for better water drainage and also soil enhancements along with an increase of yield. Larry wants less water standing and an increase of organic matter. And then Lydell is hoping for less erosion, less fuel consumption, and better soil health along with an increase of organic matter as well. And then along with these farmers, we also wanted to reach out to other farmers in the Rat River watershed. So these 3 farmers are required to do field days. As Sheila mentioned before, it's almost sometimes better when farmers are teaching other farmers. So these field days will allow farmers to come to their farms, see what's in the process, and really learn from what they're doing right now. We're also gonna hold a luncheon, which will consist of farmers and conservation staff, where we can answer any questions that farmers have in that area and just go over the goals and what our expectations are with this project going forward. And then Sheila had mentioned before the maps that we have made up for landowners in the Rat River watershed area. Recently we sent out a letter with those maps of erosion concern along with the brochure that I had recently made up. And we're just gonna hope for other farmers to reach out and with questions and to meet about their erosion concerns that they have on their properties. And then lastly, promotion is also a big thing with this project. So I have been making Facebook posts of what's going on just to get the public informed of the different things that we are doing. So that is about all I have. If any of you guys have any questions. Yeah.
Do you work with Neil Bergandy at all?
Not currently, no. I believe that I did send a letter possibly to that. I'm not sure.
Because I think he's in the Rat River area.
Okay. Yeah.
Bergandy, Pergande, Neil. I think it's NEIL.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this Engel,
Mhm.
I noticed he's got Engel back there, but yet his name is Englewood. Did he change his name?
I don't.
Because Eddie Engel was my dad's best man when he got married in 1940.
Okay.
And there were other Engel kids that took over the farm, but I
Mhm.
see this is Englewood.
Yeah, I'm not really
Maybe
certain
some
about
new
that.
guy. I'm just curious.
Mhm.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no problem.
Report. Julie, have any questions?
Thank you.
I have a question.
Julie does, thank you. Julie?
So Emily, how are you going to measure the progress on these farms? What methods are you going to use?
We are just gonna be taking soil health tests after each year and see how the organic matter has increased in the soils.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to mention, Emily's been a great addition to the department. This has been a void to really do these efforts for soil health initiatives. So getting her on board has been wonderful for the department. I'm looking forward to seeing where this all goes. Trying to change the management out there with some of the farmers within the county and doing good things.
Thank you for your report. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on. Business item B, which is the update report of the Winnebago Waterways program. During Foxhole Watershed Alliance.
Thank you so much for having me again. My name is Corinne Deering. I'm the Winnebago Waterways Program Director at Foxwood Watershed Alliance. We have a number of projects and different activities that we partner with the Winnebago County Land and Water Conservation Department on. And I know there might be a couple people that have not seen this presentation before. So I'm going to quickly run through a whole bunch of stuff. So try not to take up too much of your time because I have been known to talk a lot about the work that we do because I just enjoy it so much. So if I go too long, Chad, let me know. Just jump in. Chad had included the project portfolio, and I know it's kind of a thick, longer collection of stuff, but what I wanted to communicate with this was to just give some detailed information and give you all a chance to review before the presentation today about some of the bigger projects that we have going on. So that way, when I rush through it, you have something to refer back to later on. Has anyone not received this handout before? So I've got a couple of these. And this is just kind of a primer to the Winnebago Waterways Lake Management Plan.
Thank you.
And, so we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Oh, I've also got these. So Foxwood Watershed Alliance, we are a local nonprofit that works to restore and protect water resources in Wisconsin's Foxhole River Basin. So just in case you're not familiar with that, this here is the Foxhole River Basin. It's about 6,500 square miles, and we divide that up into 3 different sections. It's the upper Foxhole, the Wolf River, and then the lower Foxhole River. And I point that out because that's where our name comes from, because people wonder why we're hyphenating the name of 2 animals. Well, it's really referring to the basin of the watersheds. Our organization, which is on this handout here, describes it a little bit, is set up for recovery regions. So we have the Winnebago Waterways Recovery Program and the Keepers of the Fox. Keepers of the Fox is focused on the lower Fox River. And then we have several kind of support programs that are topical in nature and kind of cross into the 2 areas. So the Winnebago Waterways program, we're really focused on developing plans to guide strategic regional recovery, conduct outreach to build and sustain community support, building partner and our own program capacity, doing monitoring to try to document and show progress, report out on progress that we're making towards targets as a region, and engage elected officials and decision makers on a variety of levels. And that's my daughter.
Oh,
I use my kids a lot.
That's you mentioned she's 4 years old.
She's 4 now, yeah. And every year it gets a little bit more fire in her, so I don't know what we're gonna do when she's 16.
Big expect.
So the Winnebago Lakes, 4 lakes, a total of 159,000 acres, and the lakes themselves, the shorelines touch 4 counties. And we have over 7,000 tax parcels that border the shorelines of these lakes. And this is really the focus of the recovery that we do. And this is why the lakes are impaired. We have harmful algal blooms, low water clarity. We also have some of the lakes have had impairments for low dissolved oxygen and degraded habitat. And a lot of these issues, the main cause is excessive phosphorus and sediment pollution. Then there are other things that are happening in the lakes and in the watershed that are exacerbating that pollution problem. So these photos here, it's tough to see with the lighting, but this is from July 2020 in Winnebago, and this is a pretty common occurrence when we get to July. And this is a harmful algal bloom with potential to produce toxins that are harmful to human health, as well as pets and livestock. And it's not just contained to like Winnebago. It's a big problem. Even though we have big issues, there's still, I'd like to remind people, there's still a whole lot to love. The lakes are a treasured, valuable resource. They support one of the largest self-sustaining lake sturgeon populations in the world. Over 200,000 people get their drinking water from Lake Winnebago. And if you, account for inflation, but who knows now what this number would actually be. I haven't updated it for this year yet, but $297 million in annual revenue comes into a 5-county region around the lakes just from recreational fishing during the open water season. So that does not include sturgeon spearing, ice fishing, regular, recreational boating, it's just recreational fishing. So back in 2010, an ad hoc steering committee formed to say, well, how do we fix the lakes? We have some really big hurdles. It's a large drainage area. We talked about that big watershed. We have, over 5,700 square miles that are draining to Lake Winnebago. Huge bodies of water, complex issues, multiple jurisdictional boundaries, and a variety of competing interests from the users of the lakes, whether it's industrial or recreational or residential. So the ad hoc committee formed in 2010. They did some initial stakeholder engagement, wanted to know what do the stakeholders really see as being the big issues and how do they think that how can we tackle those issues knowing we have these hurdles. Phase 2 looked at, okay, well, we heard from stakeholders that some regional coordination would really be beneficial. How do we do that? And in phase 2, they came up with some options and then made a decision in 2016. Foxwood Watershed Alliance was chosen to facilitate the development of a lake management plan for these 4 lakes, which would serve as that regional strategy. And then in 2017, 3 counties formalized their commitment to improve and protect the lakes. And Winnebago County is part of that. Chuck's on the executive committee, the Winnebago Waterways Executive Committee. And we'll talk a little bit about what that funding does. And that's really in 2017 was the development also of the Winnebago Waterways program at Foxhole. We got into lake management planning, wrapped that up in 2020, where all four counties, including Washera, adopted and approved the lake management plan through county resolution, and the DNR also approved the plan. And then we moved into implementation, and that's where we are now. So we've been in implementation since I would say, roughly the beginning of 2021, and a lot's happened since then. So regional coordination allows work to be done across those jurisdictional boundaries with different partners, depending on the task at hand, to tackle different scales of projects, so small to large. Gives us access to multiple funding opportunities and has resulted in increased collaboration. So the base program funding, I alluded to that a little bit. Through that intergovernmental cooperative agreement, so that the three counties really committed to recovery of the lakes outside of just what their own staff are already doing within their counties. That provides base funding for the program that I run. So $20,000 per year from Fond du Lac, Winnebago, and Calumet. And that base funding allows us to leverage grants, contracts, donations, and memberships. And so we've really taken that $60,000 per year and run with it. So right now we have several multi-year, multi-funder, multi-partner projects. I listed them up here. Those are all, well, all of them should be in that portfolio packet. So we're looking at just under $3 million in grants that we've been able to leverage through the partnerships that we've built, working with the counties, working with other nonprofits to bring into the region. So I would say it's a good ROI, right, Chuck?
John, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
The base funding, of course, was established 4 years ago, 9 years. Is that still adequate?
I want to say that we are very
Just
appreciative.
tell her right up front.
Honestly, it doesn't cover the base operating costs. So if there was an opportunity to increase that base funding, I
What
would,
number are you looking for?
I don't, that's a good question. I wasn't ready for that question, Chuck. I'm not sure.
I'm not surprised, but I kind of get right to the point. I think that if I can, that's simply my nature. I assume then another 30 grand would help,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. Because that would help us cover.
just
some
for
of
my
our-
personal information.
Yeah, I think that would help us cover more of our operation costs, some of our overhead, which a lot of the grants don't cover. It gets to be really difficult as a nonprofit to cover things like rent and a lot of those costs have increased over the
For the
years.
benefit of the committee, like she said, this 20 grand was basically seed money to get Foxhole Watershed going. And it has been the amount that we have allocated through our budget to support this program. My question refers to increased costs of you name it, they're all going up, right? And we certainly support this program. It's been a very viable program, working very well. However, I think it might be time when our next executive committee meeting that we address the increased costs that this group has had. So I might bring that forward.
Refresh my memory, is it the end of 23 that we need to renew the contract?
Yeah,
So
thanks for
that's-
bringing that up, Chad. So,
Well, I don't know. We have a contract like anything else. They can be amended. So
Sure.
we'll certainly look into that a little bit. Unless there's a concern by the committee, but I would hope to support the effort to certainly ensure that they are sustained in their.
How many years has the $20,000 been granted to you?
I'm thinking.
since
This would be the-
2017.
Since 2017.
Yep.
Okay.
So it was started
Fifth
as,
year.
yeah, so it started as for lake management planning. And then with the momentum we built and the development of the Winnebago Waterways program, the counties really saw a lot of value in keeping that going and having that regional coordination to implementation. So we were really fortunate that we had that support. So that's why it's been ongoing since 2017.
And this might also, if I might interrupt, this ties
Okay.
into, he's preparing the budget. So he's just starting that process. So if we were to look at a change, he should be aware of that before, end of June? Before July?
Yeah.
So hopefully we have an executive committee meeting, yet this month would be good.
Good to know for our conversation.
So to get per county for the new ones on the committee, not just from Winnebago.
That's why I mentioned it, 30,000, so it'd be $10,000 additionally per county, which I think is certainly manageable.
And Chuck, as you asked the question, why don't you give her time, maybe she has a different number. I know you've thrown 30 out there today, but maybe the number needs to be higher than that. Since this has got a lot of traction from what we started.
Well, that's the purpose of the executive committee. So if I introduce that, we'll see where the discussion goes from there. But certainly I would not be tied to that number.
Okay,
But I think it's start.
sometimes when you throw a number out there, sometimes
Yeah,
it
you
sticks
gotta-
as a
you gotta
number.
start somewhere.
So just before you throw a number out there, if you could refer back to
Yeah,
What I'm gonna look
something
for-
you might what you really need. I
Yep.
mean,
that's something I'll work on, looking at the budget and anticipated need for, going forward. Definitely. So I'm really
Okay,
bad at
so
asking for money.
I've got another question. What is your overhead
I don't have that number right off the top of my head because
approximately?
the way, oh, I wish I did. So it's the way our organization is structured. We have our 2 regional programs, and then we have our general operations. And so I'd have to pull that up and look at it. But I could get the committee the numbers. I would just hate to throw something out because I might be way off. So.
What I'm gonna look for, when we get to the executive level is at least a summarized proposal of what the needs and increased costs are. So I would like
Yeah.
that input. To answer your question, I believe you have 2 full-time employees.
Yep.
And of course, their salaries, et cetera.
Sure.
And then you have other part-time staff also.
We have our administrative support staff that we pay for a portion of their salaries, estimating how much time they spend helping with our program, because we just hired a grants person to help with some of the workload of grant management. And then.
So much of that cost is covered by the grant, I would assume.
Some of the cost is, yeah, so that's why it gets a little complicated. So I think if I have spent some time diving into that, I can definitely come up with a summarized proposal of what our costs are now, what we anticipate going forward. And then if, let's say our grant that's currently paying for our second full-time person were to end, what it would be to keep her on if for some reason we didn't get another grant to fund her, just to give a full picture and kind of the value of the services that she brings. So
In addition to that, of course, you have your facility that I assume you rent.
yeah,
An office, I was wondering about that as well, yeah. And the overhead of the office.
That's kind of why I brought it up. I thought,
Yeah.
I did not mean to totally interrupt your.
no,
presentation, but
that's good
It
to
was an
know that that's
opportune
something.
time when you had it on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck.
Another thing worth maybe exploring too is the county that isn't contributing. Maybe it's time to revisit that to see if they'd be willing to partner with the other 3 counties.
Yeah, we should have a talk about that too.
You're referring to what, Sharon?
Share County, I just presented to their committee recently, and they have a really interesting dynamic with their committee, and I think there's potential there, especially as we're moving into, we're doing more watershed implementation. But I think there will be some hurdles with some of their committee members, just with the way I saw how they interacted with their county staff, so. It was interesting, yeah.
And I just look at the watershed example for the 9 gallon, like the savings for them. I mean, that's a lot of their county.
Yep.
Get approved under one umbrella, where what does it cost per watershed? 30,000.
Yeah,
Get it approved, and it would all be approved through this program. So
Yeah.
that might be able to try and sell it, but
that'd be something to talk about tomorrow at the steering committee, because I could use some advice on just kind of what I observed and learned on how to approach to continue building some of those relationships to get more of that buy-in.
Irregardless, we'll certainly hopefully address it within the 3 counties that are.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Chuck. Like I said, I'm really bad at asking for
So can I ask a question then? So they're gonna call it, what about Green Lake? 'Cause I see,
I can't hear you, Bruce.
what about Green Lake County? Is Green Lake County in it? It's within this watershed.
So
overall watershed.
kind of Green Lake is, so
Upper Fox watershed.
yeah, when we get past this, I'll show you kind of where our cutoff is for the Winnebago Waterways program. So the coverage area for my program covers about 1,200 square miles. We had to cut it off because otherwise it just got way too big. And Green Lake is doing some really awesome things in their area. And so we will partner on certain stuff as organizations. We definitely help promote and support what they do. But it wouldn't be part of the Winnebago Waterways program per se.
But it is listed or marked off on the upper Fox.
Yeah, so this, I'll show you in just a second. So the Winnebago Waterways program, we worked with the counties and the DNR to kind of create like a boundary. And that's where Green Lake is outside of that. So it's definitely part of the puzzle, but not the priority that we have for this particular program. And they're also doing really awesome stuff. And so that we kind of feed off each other in that way.
Yeah, so this map you see here is not the entire Foxhole Basin. It would be more the map back, it's the focus area. Where they go.
I did,
Yeah.
on one of the pictures on upper, it does show the Pollock farm where I go, over by Double K.
That's the demo farm network.
Yeah.
You're looking at there, that's a separate, two separate things.
But it does tie into this, does it not?
Yes, yep, it does. So the work that they're doing does benefit Lake Winnebago, yes.
It was just, as
Yep.
you, if you're on the steering committee side, I know how it started, but now as it expands, bring them in to it. I mean, more money for hospitals.
I know it's been talked about at the exact level to bring in some of the other counties that are beyond the focus area, but I don't know if it ever gained traction or anything like that. That was probably years ago.
No, and we can definitely revisit that conversation. The one thing we have to keep in mind though, if we go outside of this boundary, we're increasing our capacity need then for workload for staff, just because there's going to be more need then and more counties looking for the services that we're providing around the lakes. So to me, I think Watershed County makes a lot of sense. And then I think if we can get that from there, look at what's the strategy for expanding further. I think it's definitely worth those conversations, yeah, because they do contribute to the pollution and drain.
Right.
Yep.
Well, you know, the traction, if it goes back to 2010, when this all, I remember the conversation, you've got traction. So when your traction start adding on, people are starting to see the benefit to it. It's easier, you know, it's easier today than it was back.
Well, and I do have to say too, since we're on that topic, what the counties did in the Winnebago system was really kind of used as a showcase for other areas. So the Lower Fox River's been doing a lot of work in their watersheds for a while, but they didn't have a coordinator. And so after they saw what was happening in the Winnebago system with the counties, the Lower Fox River, those counties in the Oneida Nation entered into a similar agreement and are now funding a staff person who is one of the keepers of the Fox program at Foxhole. So they're kind of mirroring that example that you guys set.
When you say the Lower Fox River, are you talking about from Winnebago to Green Bay, or are you talking about, because, yes.
So here I've got, this is an example of something I was going to talk about in a little bit, but it has a map of, so this where it says number 2,
Yeah,
that would be the Lower Fox River subbasin.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's flowing north and that confused me a little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of effort from it's going on for years has been happening in the Lower Fox River, and even though that's kind of more the end point of the basin, that's just where a lot of momentum had started for a number of reasons. And you know, now with the interest and the leadership from the counties moving into the Winnebago system, But there's other stuff happening in the rest of the basin. So you have Green Lake, that they're doing some really great work. And then up in Menominee, they're doing some really great watershed work too, with coordination. And that's on top of what the county land and water conservation departments are doing. So there's a lot of stuff happening
Pardon me.
in collaboration and coordination. So yeah.
I was a newspaper reporter, and I can remember years ago doing some, stories on water quality, stuff like that. And I looked at this is a really nice thing to have. Overall water quality status poor. It was like that 25, 30 years ago too. Do you think sometimes we're just spinning our wheels because we don't get compliance like we should? Or
Yeah.
I thought we'd be better by now, but.
You bring up excellent question. I have the same concern.
So it's when
I think we do that differently.
we're trying to learn from what's happened in the past. And so one thing I really like about the Winnebago County Soil Health Challenge is, like Chad talked about, it being a 6-year program. Because what we've seen, and one thing that Foxhole we talk a lot about is, for just as an example, 1 or 2 years of trying something out with soil health, we're not going to see those results to get that buy-in from the farmers. We really need farmers to be doing this at least 5 years to see that substantial benefit, to the point where they're not relying on cost share. They don't care about cost share because they're seeing the benefit to their farm. And so looking in the past, or what programs are out there, and why aren't we seeing that actual adoption of practices or change for the long term, and trying to come up with those kind of solutions like what Winnebago County is doing. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we're trying to get at some of that. And some of it is learn as you go, and some of it's looking at what's been done in the past. And also a lot of it's building relationships and working with the stakeholders to figure out what are their interests and how can we drive motivation based on what people are motivated by.
Didn't one of your graphs show that we're in the implementation phase?
Yes.
I've been part of this from that point when they started all these conversations, so that, you were even pre that. You know what it is in life, people talk and talk and talk, they're finally getting the implementation. And now, I mean, it's great, it's gonna happen, but it just takes forever. So people like her and the support and the county finally buying in, right?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say finally, 'cause it's been a few years, but.
Well, I know,
yeah.
but I mean, the county didn't want to buy into it. I mean, the whole argument of it, it was crazy.
Well, to address that, we had a certain town board chairman, in particular, and others that were concerned about the regulated management authority on that lake, such as Green Lake. And that was very strongly opposed. So what we have now is a voluntary program, which is accepted pretty much by everyone. So I feel it's important to keep this type of program and system. If I might address Mr. Delmer's thoughts. My perception is you have Lake Winnebago, and I think if the DNR is determined that 50% of the phosphorus coming into the water is from the legacy part of the lake. In other words, the silt at the bottom of the lake, the muck. That's just full of phosphorus. So you're not going to correct that unless you dredge the whole lake, right? Which is a little monumental. So what we're looking at from my point of view is the other 50%. If you don't do something, it's going to continue to get worse than it currently is. So I think, once again, from my point of view, is to try to reduce the amount of phosphorus coming into the lake based on the 50% that we can control, or at least address. Back to Bruce's point, it's going to take 20, 30 years. It's going to take a long time. And as we go on in this presentation, I'll draw the point of view to the Rat River drainage basin, that part of it. So I'll let you continue with your, but I might interrupt when you get to that point over here, because that is a very important starting point, which is very minimal in what we're doing. That's where this ARPA funds ties in, that we're going to talk about in future.
I have a quick question. Do some property owners along Lake Winnebago, they're on the shoreline. Do they, and they might have septic tanks, do they still let them just dump it into the Lake Winnebago, or is there restrictions on that?
Well, there's definitely restriction. I mean, well, there's still some septic tanks out there. A lot of the townships and stuff have converted over to sewer. And you have your drain field, and you hope that through that process you are capturing the phosphorus and stuff, maybe not all the nitrogen, but the big issue in these lakes is phosphorus. But there's definitely no direct pipe to
So
the
the
lakes.
dumping septic tanks is remote. I mean, they could get heavily fined, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank
No-
you.
No raw sewage, please.
It's,
So living in Neenah, they went about cleaning, and I think it's Little Lake Beautiful. They went about doing that huge cleanup project that took years to accomplish. But it's completed now, is it not?
It is complete. That was for PCB pollution from the paper mills.
A different,
It's thank you for answering that question. It was not the same thing that cleanup was for.
No,
however, when they did take that out, the operators took the phosphorus with it.
that was a secondary benefit.
Yeah, it was a secondary benefit.
Okay, thank you.
But geographically, that's much smaller than they want to make plants.
No,
Which is interesting, right, with how much that costs. I can't
It's
imagine.
a really big initiative, big time stuff.
Yeah, I worked on that project for a little bit.
Did you?
Yeah. But okay, well, I won't get too off track with that. I do want to talk a little bit about, in addition to the grants that we have, we are really working on building a more sustainable base to help cover some of those operational costs and also help to increase our capacity. Because even though we have expanded to 2 full-time staff, there's plenty of work for even more. And then also being able to fund things like equipment or different training or as needs come up. So we've been working with some businesses and other organizations. We've been trying to promote more about memberships, doing event sponsorships to try to, again, stretch that dollar. So this year, I'm really happy to report we received an $18,000 donation from a local business in Appleton called Model Inc. The owner of that business is also a lifetime member, just personally for his family. We just received word that someone that works for Mercury Marine was given an award, and attached to that was the opportunity to donate $5,000 from the Brunswick Corporation to their nonprofit of choice. And they selected the Winnebago Waterways program. We've also got some other organizations contributing dollars. So this is really exciting to see some of this grow and build. It takes a lot of work to do, and I'm not great at asking for money, but we're getting there. We hope that this continues. One thing that these slides did not cover is the match that's provided from our project partners like Winnebago County and that are working on these grants. And so there's still quite a bit that's coming in to help make these projects happen from other sources through staff time, equipment use, that kind of thing. So the time frame for the lake management plan is 20 years. It's not a static document. Things change over time. And so it's really taking an adaptive approach, but using that plan as kind of a guide of where we started, what are the issues, and how are we going to address them. This stuff is in this handout here, just talking about the different topics that were studied, that the goals and targets are science-based, and the recommendations were developed by several tech teams, but then were reviewed and helped prioritized by focus groups, so members of the public and stakeholders. So we really look at this as being a community plan. Foxhole, the Winnebago Waterways program, is the home for the plan, but we do not own it. And so we really we're working this year and next year to really help bring this plan to other groups and encourage them to take a leadership role in trying to tackle some of those recommendations and to really buy in and have some ownership in this. So this is one of the maps I mentioned. This shows kind of the coverage area for the Winnebago Waterways recovery program, 1,200 square miles. There's a lot of lake acres. So those lake acres include the other lakes that aren't necessarily part of our are not on our priority list for this particular effort, but are still part of this area and will benefit from changes that are happening in the landscape. And a lot of wetland acres, but not nearly enough. So this gets at what you were talking about, how we have this big drainage area that's contributing, phosphorus and sediment to these lakes, but we're only covering a portion of it with these particular initiatives. We have to start somewhere, and we can only go so big at a time. So if we look at this graph here, shows what our baseline, our starting point was for the phosphorus concentration in each lake, and where our goal is. So our goal is to basically get to 60 micrograms per liter of what we can measure of phosphorus in the water column in the summer months. And that helps kind of give an indicator of what the health of the lake is. But to delist the lakes from the EPA and the DNR's impairment list, we have to get the lakes down to 40 micrograms per liter. The reason our goal is 60 in the lake plan is because we're only able to take ownership of the area that's prescribed by the lake management plan. But we know that outside of the Winnebago Waterways recovery area, a lot of work is still going to be needed to get us down to that 40. And that's where, as an organization, Foxhole works with other groups to help support their work and to, help bring in dollars and coordination. And then also just to say, hey, there's groups out there that are doing great things that are going to help us get from that 60 to 40. So we have a diverse project portfolio, and that's really intentional because we need to have things happening short term to have some kind of more immediate wins, to be able to showcase that progress, to be able to maintain momentum and get that buy-in and support for those long-term ventures. Because as Chuck mentioned, some of this stuff is going to take decades, but humans are naturally short-term thinkers. And so we're addressing external loading by working it with in agricultural and urban areas to reduce the quantity and improve the quality of water runoff. Restoring shorelines and stream banks to reduce erosion. And we're looking to the wastewater treatment plants and their permit compliance to improve or increase treatment to reduce loading from those treatment plants. Most of the lake plan is focused on agricultural runoff and practices because a lot of the other things are going to, not shoreline, agricultural practices and shoreline practices, because some of the urban stormwater and the wastewater treatment plant reductions are going to come through that permit compliance. We're not relying on it completely, but just trying to prioritize where we need to focus. So in Fond du Lac County, we have a project from funding from GLRI, similar to the Rat River project that we're partnered with your county on. We have 2 farmer champions there, and they're doing the soil health systems. Then we have the Rat River project. I need to update the slide to increase those acres, how that worked out. With those agricultural projects comes a lot of outreach, and so this is a sign that your county will be getting very similar ones here soon. And these go at the fields to showcase which fields are participating in these soil health programs. So it just shows soil health in progress. And this was designed by Fond du Lac County, but we're going to be using them throughout the recovery area. We also hold events. So we had the first farmer roundtable for this area in February of this year. It was really successful. We had over 100 people, 75% of them were farmers. And this was planned with help from the Winnebago Waterways Agriculture Outreach Work Group. I just love long names, I think. And so Sheila was part of that. Emily will be invited to be part of that with our next meeting. It's been really successful. We also have our semi-annual newsletter that's coming out of these projects. Right now, it's distributed by mail to just over 1,200 farmers and ag landowners. That's this Basin Buzz. And then there's also an online blog of that. The next version will be coming out later this summer. And then we have the field days, demo field days that we're doing. And again, we have the agriculture outreach work group. The idea is to pull that group together. We also have the demo farms, part of that, several counties, NRCS, and a few farmers on that team. We know that a lot of people are doing these field days and other stuff. So how can we really collaborate to capitalize and not be too duplicative? We have a shoreline restoration program. So when we added a second person, we were able to start this program. It's assisting property owners with a few different best management practices. And we will have, we're installing our first demonstration site at Columbia Park in Fond du Lac County over the next 2 weeks. And we have 2 more to install over the next 2 years. We currently have 6 properties that we were able to get a DNR cost share grant for native plantings and rain gardens. So, this is stuff that some of that your department does some of these things. And so we're kind of adding to that, working across boundaries. And then it's really great to have the Winnebago County staff to work with and collaborate and have that community. So this is just a little bit about that. I'm just going to zoom through. So we are looking for 2 more locations. So if you guys know of one that's on the shoreline, let me know. We have a winter sow program. So this is our program where we can try to get more people engaged, whether they're living on the lake or not living on the lake, to really get excited about native plants. And so we have a native plant growing program. We're working with DNR on a large fish sticks project to add habitat, and fish sticks also help with water quality. And then we're working on internal loading. So that piece that Chuck mentioned that's in those sediments, it's that legacy phosphorus. Our goal is to reduce that internal loading by 25% in 10 years. And that's through things like break walls and increasing aquatic vegetation. So this is a project that we're partnered with Winnebago County, as well as the DNR and Junior Conservation Club on, to install a large break wall at Singers Bay, reusing rock removed from Terrell's Island. So it's kind of a 2-for project. I'm guessing that they're familiar with this, right? So
I think so. New committee members may not be with this project. So our department, we are heavily involved with break walls throughout the Winnebago system. We've done over 6 miles that have been designed through our department. And we partnered on this project, the 1,400 feet that you see there, that's the existing break wall. And the problem there was water exchange. It was one opening up on the north end there, and there were no other openings. We were not part of the initial design. So they're removing 1,400 feet to try and get a little more water exchange. And like Corinne mentioned, we're recycling that stone, building a new break wall where the yellow line is. And that built about half of that break wall, about 3,000 feet and about 3,000 feet more to build. But on the south there, we were losing 8 to 9 feet a year based on the historical photos we looked at from erosion of the wetlands. So the break wall will stop the erosion, and then the open water that you see behind the yellow line, with time, that'll become reestablished with aquatic plants. And that'll help hold that lake bottom, take up some of the nutrients, and it's phenomenal habitat for the fisheries and wildlife. So we designed it, and then we're partnering with Foxhole, DNR, Viewpoint Conservation Club on this project. So
Hopefully it'll get done this next winter. Knock on wood, for ice conditions. And then with increasing aquatic vegetation beyond using break walls, we also have, we facilitate a water level assessment team, which is basically a group of stakeholders that works together to develop realistic and achievable water level strategy recommendations that we then submit to the Army Corps of Engineers. The two dams are, well, Menasha is owned and operated by the Army Corps of Engineers, but they also work with the owner of the Nina Dam for operations to manage the level of Lake Winnebago. And water levels, especially during the springtime, are really critical to aquatic plant growth because of low water clarity. So if the water levels are too high and water clarity is low, sunlight is not hitting the lake bottom where we need it to facilitate plant growth when the sediment and the water starts to warm up at the end of winter and spring.
With that new bridge there, is that going to impact the dam at all?
No, that's a great question, but that won't have.
And all of the huge pilings that they've put in there,
Yeah,
just, and when I say pilings for the bridge, they're enormous.
yeah.
How do I know? I live there.
I like to go to the weather vane, so I see the bridge quite often. Yeah,
Our boys own Club Liquor, so.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna affect dam operations just from the shape of that area, but in an overall picture of the issue, the Army Corps is going to, open and close gates based on what they're seeing on the landscape, what the levels of the lake are, and what the forecast for the weather is. To try to maintain lake level within that green band that you see there. And they decide on that green band every single year. And so what we do is we bring stakeholders together to have conversations. There's a lot of competing interests involved in that. You have borders, property owners, you have companies that are generating hydroelectric power, paper plants, Oshkosh flooding, a lot of different issues. So this is a key component in seeing that aquatic vegetation response. And we also have a water quality monitoring program that's dual purpose. One is for citizen engagement, and another is to just help track more long-term trends to see what is happening with water quality. We're recruiting volunteers. We still need someone for the southern site in Fond du Lac this year. So if you know anyone that has a boat, wants to get out for a few hours a month, let me know. Chad mentioned this. I'm not gonna spend a bunch of time on this, but just that we did in collaboration with the counties and EDGE put in a proposal for the USDA partnerships for climate smart commodities. What we've learned from going through the process of developing the proposal is that there is a big push coming from market and industry for the entire supply chains to become carbon neutral, or even being carbon negative. And this type of thing would help us. The same practices that are going to be benefiting capturing carbon are practices that are going to benefit water quality. And so looking at what does that look like? How can we help our local help our region be part of this transition and not left behind. So talking about the diverse portfolio, again, the benefits are seeing those success stories in the short term while longer projects continue, engaging a diverse sets of stakeholders from individuals like shoreline property owners to agencies, targeting topics of interest from those different stakeholder groups, and also showing that it takes efforts from multiple areas to improve the lake. So instead of pointing fingers, we're working across the different areas, so we're working together. I encourage you to connect with us. If you're not receiving our monthly newsletter, I've got a sign up sheet. Does everyone get her? Pretty good. I can get you signed up. You can send me an email. We're also actively on social media. Seems to be the place to be.
Just a quick observation. It's too bad we live in an area that is low land, basically. We have a lot of low farmland that doesn't dry out very well. Case in point, my dad and the slice from this land now, he had a pipe like this out of the ground and it was a spring underneath it. And the water would flow year round. I used to stop there and get a drink water from it because it was wonderful. It tasted good. It was ice cold. Didn't do that in the winter. Of course, we put cows on the pasture and they were drinking from it too. So, but I don't think it hurt me that I shared it with them. But it's a spring, you know, and there are other parts of our farm too at such low land that, well, we're not gonna till these 2 acres because it's too wet. The rest of the field we can do. But that's just an observation. It's too bad we can't send some of this water out to West Coast. I mean, they're begging for stuff out there, but so I think that's a perpetual problem here too. We've got such low land. You know, we're like New Orleans. Everything, nothing dries out hardly ever. You know, you might get a year once in a while when it's nice, everything you can till, but well, we can't help that. We can't help where photography came, where, you know, the glaciers, what they left, but that's, you know, just an observation. We seem to be in a wet area.
What a blessing. We have water to drink.
I didn't hear you, what?
What a blessing to be in a wet area. We have water to drink. Nobody's telling us how to regulate our water. Are you a 501c3?
Yes. To the point of the water, we've lost about 50% of our wetlands. And so I think part of what we're doing is we're using our landscape in a way that maybe in certain areas where we've been trying to dry it out, you can only dry out so much of a low-lying wet area. I've gotten a lot of several calls recently about the Larson area and the Winchester area, and there's major concerns there. And I feel really helpless with providing any type of guidance for those property owners and those farmers. Chad, I'm sure your department's gotten some calls, especially from the Larson area, where you've got property owners who have literally lost acres and acres to saturation, even during drier periods. And that is an interesting point, because one thing we're pushing for is to hold more water back on the land. That's kind of a general statement. It's definitely not a prescriptive for every single area, because you do have some areas that just cannot handle more water. And that might be that they're so saturated because other areas have gotten really efficient at their drainage and conveyance. So it's interesting how it's all connected.
Yeah. Do you have any historical records on water temperature over the year?
That, you know, the Arctic Corps and USGS might, because they have, Lake Winnebago has 4 gauges around the lake. There's one in Boygan and then some on the rivers. That would be the only place to get more historical data from, because the lakes themselves, especially the 3 upper pool lakes, do not have a long-term consistent data record.
In another question, you showed early on, you showed some pictures of the algae problems. Does anybody actually have a way of measuring how bad it is? Excuse me, I apologize for this. It's, I know in 2020, it was, you hear reports that it was real bad. Last year, I didn't hear those kind of reports. I assume it wasn't so bad last year. But is there any way of measuring that? So we have kind of some data that we could really use?
Yeah, what's tricky about blue-green algae blooms, especially on these lakes, is that conditions change very rapidly. So like by the time you go out and collect a water sample, try to measure, a common way to do it is to measure chlorophyll A, which indicates, how concentrated algae bloom was. But by the time you get that to the lab and process it, the conditions in the lake have completely changed. And so we're working with a private company called Bramble. We have other projects that aren't necessarily included in this, but they're looking at how to detect using pocket microscopes and smartphones, where you go out, you collect a sample, you make a slide from the water sample, take a photo with your smartphone, it goes to artificial intelligence system that then identifies what species of cyanobacteria it is and an approximate concentration. And then you get that back real time. And so if we could do that, we could have a network of volunteers who kind of do this more frequent reporting, so that over a season we got a better idea of what the average was, and then we could compare between years within a few year time frame. Right now, how we measure it is, 6 times a year, chlorophyll is measured from 3 different points in Lake Winnebago, 1 point in each of the other 3 lakes. And that's then sent to a lab, and we could use those concentrations to look at it. But that's because of the method, you have to have a longer time frame. You have to have several years of consistent data collection to really be confident in if you're seeing a trend, whether it's getting worse or better, because you throw in a lot of variables like precipitation and average temperature and sunlight. And so you see 1 year might be better, 1 year might be worse, but you can't draw a conclusion just from a couple of years. So I got in the weeds there. The other thing we have is satellite data for Lake Winnebago. And there's an EPA program, and that's been on my kind of like back burner list of really wanting to contact them to see if we could do some type of GIS remote sensing change detection to try to determine, have we seen increase or decrease in overall coverage? Because they can use satellites and the wavelength that the chlorophyll is detected at to get an approximate index of severity for the algae blooms. Pretty cool. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did kind of sort of.
We don't have a great way, and that's one of the reasons we have the water quality monitoring program, and we started that in 2020, because we really need to have annual consistent data collection to be able to say, okay, over time, this is what's happening, and we didn't have that before.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at it from year to year, because like I say, you read reports, and 2020 was real bad and 21 wasn't so bad. But I've been following what the Army Corps of Engineers does with the water levels. And And I'm going to talk to them when they have their meeting this fall and see if we can't get it changed a little bit more to following water temperature than the calendar.
I would love that.
Because I think what happened last year, it warmed up real quick in the year. And we had a lot of that extra plant growth. This year, the water levels early on kind of got away from them, and Lake Winnebago got high too quick. Compounded the fact that this was a really cold spring.
Yeah.
So we're probably not going to have the plant growth that you wanted this year.
Right. Temperatures just recently, like in the last week, reached 70 degrees in the water. So that's kind of it took a long time for them to warm up.
Yeah, it's, so I'm kind of curious as to what the algae is going to be like this year compared with last year. I would expect it to be much worse.
I've heard that's gonna be the case.
And it's has more to do, I think, with water temperature than runoff.
Thank you for your comments. Julie, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You have a question?
No, I don't, but I did want to thank Corinne for that, her regular email, because it allowed me to understand what a fish stick was. I had no idea, but there was that nice explainer in your email. So thank you for that, Corinne.
Any other questions? I have an observation we should maybe discuss here. Karen, this document that you gave to us indicates that the Rat River watershed area is the highest polluting area of the areas we are reviewing. Correct?
Or Winnebago.
Highest
Winnebago
phosphorus polluting watershed within one river.
Winnebago County. Yeah.
And I believe it was stated we have two farmers.
Yeah, that would probably be it.
It's another low area, isn't it?
Yeah.
Elaine, I
Yes.
believe it was stated that we only have two farmers signed up for conservation
Three.
practice,
We
three.
got three, yep, and then we
And
just
that
sent
would
out
be a total of 400 acres.
271,
Pardon me?
271.
Although this document states there are 28,566 acres within that watershed. So the obvious question is, I assume many of the farmers within that watershed have been contacted.
Yep, we just sent out letters this week.
So my question is, why aren't the farmers signing up? What can we do to promote more participation in that watershed, which is identified as the highest polluting watershed? In other words, that's the target. What do we need to do to get more cooperation up there?
Yeah, so my assumption as to why they're not really signing up is that a lot of the times when they do convert to this, we do have a drop in yield for that first 3 years. And then after those 3 years, then we start seeing increases in soil health. So they're scared to take that risk and to just promote this and get awareness out there about the increase that they can have in the future. We sent out the letters, and then with all those letters, it does state that we will be meeting with them to talk about these practices. So we're hoping that when we actually get to talk to them in person, that they might take interest in doing this.
Bruce, question for you, this drop in yield. Obviously, farmers are a business. The more yield they have, the more money they make to sustain their family and their business. So what could be done to compensate for that loss in yield?
Well, I think disregard that point is what the benefit of, depends on the degree of what this is saying, if they have to go completely no-kill.
We would like to see that,
Okay.
yes.
I've told at this meeting, I showed pictures last month. We've done like 700 acres last year voluntarily because we do not fit in as a no-kill farmer of cover crops. So I do it because I can see that there is a benefit of it. We have not seen any yield decrease by doing what we're doing. If anything, there's been an increase. This year by our diggings out in the fields, like, we haven't seen angleworms over the years that we've done it. Now this is our third year. Like anywhere you dig, you got angleworms. We've never seen it, but we've had more disease from other insects in our soybeans, especially from pollen cover crops. There's always pluses and minuses. I see a greater benefit. If I would be on this committee saying that I think it's beneficial.
And at the end of the day, I mean, yield is one part of it, right? So it's
We're
all
just
your
doing-
inputs, there's less inputs, less diesel being used.
Our
everything
organic,
like that.
we're losing organic matter on our overall from our testings. You know, that we observed. It's just been that way because we've been aggressive when you push. And we're in part of being part of the committee and or just watching these that water display. If you just had the water display itself.
Yeah.
I mean, a farmer cannot argue that. I cannot argue that.
And that's a big part with this grant. It doesn't sound like a lot of acres and it isn't overall. But remember, these 3 farmers, it's to get them, it's more educational. We're gonna bring in other farmers to show over so many years, this is what you can do. It's gonna be field days with educational bringing.
I
you're
wish
talking
Dan
about-
was here today, Dan Stokes. I mean, he's been the advocate of this for 25 years. probably,
Exactly.
or
It's
more.
gonna be nice to have him on the committee.
And he could speak more eloquently to all this. We, in years past, we've gone to his farm and seen what his soil structure has changed.
Definitely.
But it just,
They realize that this isn't gonna happen overnight. It's a marathon and it's something that we're just really starting to ramp up in this county now. It's starting with Emily and the Rat River Watershed. You know, I'm seeing this gain traction with time. We're starting with the highest loading watershed, the Rat River, and then looking to work our way throughout the county, keep doing these efforts and getting more grants or the ARPA funds and really trying to get that management change done, but it does take time.
if you took a financial thought to a farmer today at today's grain prices, in what, if you took 20% off of what that would be, it's several $100s per acre that they would be losing on an annual basis plus. But I think there's a greater benefit to it, and that you just have to do it. I mean, we've been doing it voluntarily.
I think within this watershed, I would suggest that part of the focus might be to identify why the farmers are not signing up. Because if this is the most polluting watershed, it needs to be the target. But to identify those concerns, maybe we can find ways to address them, especially with the ARPA funds issue pending. So if you would do that, that'd be great. Maybe we can put that on the agenda. How much time for any? A couple months? What we're working with.
Well, we're just getting started. We haven't even paid a farmer yet in this water.
Well, she said she just sent them out too, right?
Yep, the letter.
So we're
So
just getting.
let's wait for some response time. We'll put it on there maybe in July or August. That we can address it.
Yeah.
We might have a better idea of where we are with our funding. Are there any other questions from the committee members?
I have a quick observation, Chuck.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think part of the reason why there's a lag in farmers signing up is a resistance to what the government wants to tell them to do. Because they said, this is my land, I'm not having the government tell me what to do, Real conservative, farmers generally are conservative. So and that might play a little bit of a part here too, where they, go away, Winnebago County, until you force me. They might be sympathetic to what we want to do, but I could be all wet on that one too. I don't know.
I think there's something to be said there, and that's where some of the farmer-led initiatives coming from the farmer, where they're talking to other farmers, it's not coming from us. That
Right,
creates a lot of-
right.
Exactly. That certainly will help, but I suggest that needs to be our target. Any other questions from the committee? Julie, did you have something?
I did want to mention, I have to get out of here in 8 minutes, so,
Okay, certainly.
all right.
as needed. Thank you, Corinne, for your presentation and for addressing all the concerns and questions. Appreciate that.
I really tried to keep it short, but you guys had great questions, so the engagement was awesome.
Yeah, well, that's why I kind of limit that to 15 minutes, because I anticipate you're gonna have another 15 or 20 minutes of questions. Thank you very much for your understanding. We will now move to business item C, which is review and should that be review or take action or just review?
Just review. This has already been approved through the county board for 4 years. This is renewed each year.
So review the Winnebago County Upper Foxhole Demonstration Farm Network Agreement. And you have a copy of that in your packet.
So I'll first, yep, so that would be the agreement, but I also included some information in your packet about the demo farm network. So what this is, it consists of 10 demonstration farms in the Upper Foxhole Watershed. And the idea is farmers doing everything we're talking about here, these soil health initiatives. So they work on doing innovative practices. There's experimental things being done, opening it up to other farmers to have field days to kind of learn from each other what works, what doesn't work. And within our county, the map on the second page shows the watershed area, and we're overachievers for Winnebago. We have 2 farmers. One of them was mentioned earlier, the Rick Gerke site, that's on the cover of our soil health brochure. And Albright Farms is the other farm that's included in the demo farm network. So this is
Would that be the Fox River or the Jason?
Fox is by Gerke's. Yep. So this initiative is through NRCS. They pay for 75% of the cost, and then the other counties kick in the other 25% of the cost. So that would be our county, Wapaka County, Fond du Lac, Green Lake, Marquette, Outagamie, Portage, and Shoreline County and Green Lake Association is part of this effort as well. So on the last page, it just shows all the partners, a lot of them that I just mentioned. But the agreement that we're looking to review, this was approved through county board. This would be, I think, 3-4 years ago, this was approved, and I renew it annually. And Wapaka County is the lead on this effort for managing the grant. And we have this agreement with them to basically, this would be part of the 25% of the cost that we kick in for Tilt, the aid manager. That's who was hired to lead these efforts. So the money that's kicked in from the counties helps pay the salary, mileage. Each demo farm gets $2,000 per farm. So this helps pay for some of those costs. And then there's outreach, there's a website, videos that are made to educate producers in this watershed. There's soil sampling that is done, and a number of different things. So this would be the agreement for this year. Wapaka got it to me a little bit late. He's always behind the 8 ball, but it's just to review with all of you to let you know that this is being approved again and we move forward. And we have money set aside for this year for a maximum $4,600 to pay for 2022. And then we have 1 more year left, and then they're looking to renew this agreement hopefully for another 4 years to continue the demo farm network.
Do we need a resolution?
We would at that point, yes.
Do we today?
Not today,
It's not an action item, it's just.
Okay,
just to review.
sounds ready to give you one.
Yeah, I will be asking down the road, so
Okay,
it's just something to review with all you that this is through Wapaka.
Any questions for Chad from the committee?
Yeah, Chad, that takes it out to the 6 years then, if
This
you add the additional 4 years, excuse me.
would be, it'd be 4 years that we're doing. So next year would be a 1-year agreement that I'm gonna do, that I'll need, because we only did 4. And then after that, they're looking to extend it 3 or 4 years beyond that. And that's when the resolution will be needed to take the county board to get that approved.
Okay.
Yep,
So the extension needs.
yes. Yep.
Any other questions for Chad? Hearing none, we'll move on to business item D. Discuss the Land Water Conservation Department press schedule for extended business hours, and I believe this comes from administration. first heard about it, I thought, well, Chad maybe needs to keep the committee informed as to what's going on. And this is the directive from our county executive.
Yeah, so one of my department head meetings, the question was asked, they're having a hard time retaining employees. So one of the components is wages, which they're looking to do a wage study this year. But the exec was asking other ways that we could retain employees. And one thing we used to have in the department is a compressed schedule. So we work a 9-hour day and staff would be off every other Friday is how it was structured previously. So I mentioned that
Give that in hours, how many hours per week?
per week, so I'll do it per pay period. So what we're looking to do, or what was approved, is working a 9-hour day, 81 hours in a pay period, essentially is what we're looking at. So
Which is 2 weeks.
that'd be a two-week time period.
So
That's
you're
our pay
40
period.
and a half hours a week.
Yep, so we're working a little bit more, but the pitch was a couple things that would open our doors longer. So our doors are open now instead of 8 to 4:30, we're open 7:30 to 5 o'clock. So we're open longer for the public. It creates a little bit longer day, I think more efficiencies, because there's times we're out in the field, you gotta get back, a little bit longer day, I feel like it's more efficient. And the big thing is morale in the departments. I mean, it's going a long ways. I know when I had it, I really appreciated it. It was part of what made me take the job when I took it in 2000 as a project manager, was having off every other Friday. It was a really nice perk. You put in your time. Went a long way. So
And that's paid time off.
yes. So you get your time in at the end of the day, all the staff in the department, I need them to put their time in for that 2 week. So, and keep the doors open 7:30 to 5 o'clock. So that's really it in a nutshell. And the way we have it structured right now is we have no more than 2 staff off on a given day. So for example, tomorrow there will be 2 staff off, or 1 tomorrow, we have a vacant position, but there'll be 2 staff off every Friday, 2 staff off on 1 Monday, and 1 staff off on a Monday. So we stagger it and we have it structured where we have coverage. So certain positions have different job duties, and I don't want, for example, both technicians to be off on a given day. So we stagger that, so we have the expertise in the department for a given day, so it's not both of us off on the same day.
So essentially, at some point over the course of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you would end up with a 4-day weekend? How cool is that?
Well, it's typically a 3-day weekend if it falls, like, for example, Memorial Day. So if it's someone's Monday off, they would get off on the Tuesday. Or if it's a Friday, or they get off on Thursday, so then you get a 4-day weekend. Otherwise, it's a 3-day weekend every other week for staff is how it's structured right now. Doesn't cost the county anything. So there's no money on the levy. There's no increase in anything. And we're getting more coverage. Our doors are open longer, Monday through Friday. And I think staff are happier. So to me, it's a win-win. The exec was supportive of it, HR was supportive of it, and I don't know.
They suggested.
I had suggested it, and just they're looking for ideas, but the exec was definitely supportive of it. I don't know the traction in other departments, but hopefully it helps retain employees. I can tell you, there's a four pages of openings right now in this county, and HR is running ragged, doing job interviews and trying to retain people. A little bit of flexibility like this, in my opinion, goes a long way. It's the world we live in now. It's just different.
I might also add the highway committee, highway department, has been working 4-day weeks during the summer period for years now. They work 12-hour days, 4 days, and then they get a 3-day weekend. And anything in addition to that, of course, would be time and a half. But this worked very well for them, so it simply continues to be integrated, perhaps through different departments. So. Any questions on this change?
I have to take off now. Thanks for everything. We'll see y'all soon. Bye.
Yeah, at the next meeting. that we have. If there's no more questions on business item D, we will go to E, approve the Winnebago County Water Quality Improvement Program cost share agreements. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new.
That would be projects, so that would not be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And that would be, I guess,
I don't have a
Question.
we get a project sheet.
it's a question I have for the committee. So as you recall, we used to have a spreadsheet, but now finance wants me to put all the details in the agenda items. So we put all the cost share agreements in here. And then we decided not to include the spreadsheet. It was a little bit repetitive, but I can put it in there. It shows the units and what the practice is. If you would
I would
prefer that.
refer to spreadsheet.
Okay, I will do that for the next meeting. Problem.
Give you a little more detail of what that does.
No problem.
On that, we have one here, which is a big one, which is the Wetland Restoration Project for about $5,500. That's for Dennis and Susan Jones.
Yep.
Where's
So
that located?
that project would be in the town, I think that's Nakayama Black Wolf, south of Oshkosh. He's been experiencing erosion on his site. The water's been jumping out of his waterways, so we're working to regrade the waterway to make it stable.
Is that a farm field?
Farm field, yep. And then with that, he agreed to put in a wetland scrape towards the end of the waterway, so it'll help collect some of that sediment. So that was because they went above and beyond when they typically do a 70% cost share. But if they go above and beyond, like putting in a scrape, then we'll do a 90% cost share, because it will include a little bit more conservation on the property. So the 5,500 here for the county program, that's 20% of the cost for the whole project. And then the remaining 70% we pay the state funds through our state data gap funds. So that would be a total of a 90% cost share for that project.
Does this happen to fall within that area that the city of Oshkosh is concerned about?
Don't know if it's in Sawyer Creek.
Watershed?
I don't think it is, but I would have to confirm. So really nice project, but one thing I do want to point out, the price, we just got the bids, was it yesterday or the day before? For example, a waterway that was typically $3 to $4 a foot, we're seeing $9 a foot. Prices have doubled for the work we do. So our dollars are not going to go as far as they used to get practices on the landscape. The prices are crazy. I mean, diesel at over $5 a gallon, as everybody knows. It's, yeah, the money we're getting is just not going to do what it used to. So it's really important that we keep the money we have and really try to supplement it in the future. Maybe the ARPA funds would be a nice mechanism to be able to supplement that. The other two projects on here are well abandonments. So we provide cost sharing for abandoning your well. That can be a direct source to groundwater, if we get pollution in the well. So we have a program to properly abandon the well with a $500 cap. So those would be the other two agreements that are on the list here.
Any questions? That was a group. So I'll need a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed? Business item F, review the land water conservation department project list. Now I got it right, that's this one. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new projects.
So the first one on here, Nathaniel Frank, that was one of the well abandonments you just approved. Jeremy Holtman, that is a site real close to the border of Fond du Lac. Really extreme erosion, probably 3, 4, 5 foot gullies. That area in the county is the most erosive spots I've ever seen over there. So we're looking to work with him to address some of the erosion potentially with a grass waterway to try and get that stable. So we'll be meeting with him in the near future. Nick Radloff, he is putting in a manure storage tank. So that's not something we fund, but we are designing it And it's part of our livestock permits. We have to issue a permit, we oversee construction of the tank to make sure everything is installed properly with rebar, concrete specs. Again, to protect the groundwater is really the goal with that. So working on that design, Melanie within our office is working on that. And that should be going in this year. Sharon Reimer is another well abandonment. And then Ron Walpole's right off of 41, there's some pretty good erosion jumping out of the waterway there. So we're looking to redesign the waterway and cost share that one.
Any questions on the project list? That is simply a review. Next thing on the agenda is a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Favor say aye.
9.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Great meeting. Great meeting.
And all of the good questions.